Anyway, good morning, everyone. Today, I want to give you a brief taste of the extension to Voyant that we're building that we call Spiral or Spiral. The joke here is Spiral Notebook because what we're developing is a cloud-based notebook programming environment that can extend Voyant. I stress the word extend. It's not a different environment. It's the same underlying text technology. It's just a different interface. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and go in. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, I can. I think Ajibola Maseta, can you all see? Can someone just indicate if you can see the
Yes,
screen?
yes, we
All
can
right,
see.
all right.
Great. So right here, we're looking at the entry screen to Voyant. I'm going to open a small corpus, in this case, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I always like showing this particular corpus because in some ways I think of Voyant as a form of Frankenstein's monster or a chimera, because in effect what we're doing in Voyant is we're taking a text and then we are sort of cutting it into pieces and then reassembling it in new visualizations and stuff. Well, you'll remember yesterday I talked about how you can export any one of these panels with a tool in it. And one of the things you can do is export it as a Spidal notebook. So I'm going to click the export button here. And what Voyant does is it creates a new Spidal notebook with the code. It actually gives you two code cells with the code to show exactly the interactive panel that you were looking at. Now, of course, it's a little bit bigger here, but it's got the same settings. And if we look at this code, you shouldn't be scared of it because we've tried to sort of keep the amount of code that you've got to worry about, we've tried to keep it down. So we have up here, we have a thing here, load corpus, and we assign it a name, my corpus. So from here on in, for the rest of the notebook, we can just call my corpus. And then we have a thing called mycorpus.tool, which basically will call any one of the other tools that you have in in Voyant that you like. It'll call it. There's various parameters that you can set. In this case, we have the parameter query, and we have a list of words that we want to query, and then we have another parameter here about what mode we're looking at. We can change some of these words. So I could go for monster, creature. Go for some dark words here, death, and I'm going to delete the other words. Um, and then we can just run the code cell again and it regenerates. And now we can see something different, a different sort of distribution graph of a different set of words. So the short answer about what Spidal is it is an environment, a notebook. It's linear in that sense, in which you can have text cells and code cells, and you can have any combination of them. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you an already existing Spidal notebook, and then I'll return here and give you a little bit more of a demo of how you can play around with this. Um, so this is a notebook that I put together. Um, I'm sorry, is there a question or nope?
No,
Okay.
it was a cough, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, coughing is good. So this is a notebook that I put together about research that I'm doing with a Japanese colleague, Keiji Amano, and another colleague who's down in the States, Mimi Okabe. And what we're looking at is we're looking at Japanese game companies and how they announce in their various online websites and documents that they have, annual reports and stuff like that, how they describe their slogans, their missions, their vision, and their values. So we're trying to look at the ethics of companies. And the first cell up here, when I click on it, this particular cell is the metadata. So this is where I can control, I can type who is the author, the title that's going to appear. I can decide whether or not this should be included in the public catalog and be discoverable by other people. Because all of these notebooks, unlike Jupyter notebooks, for those of you who are used to the notebook and Jupyter model, these notebooks are stored and cached up with Voyant in the cloud. So you can either make them discoverable or you can just leave them so people can't find them. We could write a little description, you can identify the license and so on. I'm going to hit cancel here. And then that's the only metadata cell that we have. All the rest of the cells are either text cells or code cells. And in this case, the first one here, we have a text cell in which I describe what it is that we're doing. And I actually give a link to the Voyant corpus. So if you wanted to explore the same corpus in Voyant, which is, as I said, a different interface, you could do it there. And then I talk about how this was developed for a paper that we gave at a conference in 2024. Then I have a second code cell here, and these code cells are your standard web editing cells. You know, you've got different styles here, you've got different heading levels. You can create links, you can put pictures and stuff and tables. You can even edit the raw HTML. So all of you are probably used to this if you played with something like WordPress or so on. And then down here, I have an interesting, this is a code cell, but it's a code cell which was set up for HTML. So I configured it, sorry, XML. I configured it as an XML code cell, and this code cell is editable as is. So I basically created my corpus as a simple XML file. I've just copied and pasted chunks of, here you can see some stuff from Sega Sammy. And because I'm using XML, I've got some parameters, if you will, for this element here. And it goes on and on. So I can edit this as I desire. So in fact, I'm managing my corpus right here, and then I assign it a particular variable name. And then what I do is I create a corpus. I create a Voyant corpus. So I take the text, the XML text, and I created a corpus, but I'm using an advanced feature here that allows me to use the XML and allows me to group the different chunks of text by family, where the family is the company, the family of companies like Sony US and Sony Japan would be part of the same family. So in effect, I am taking a collection of different documents, but I've tagged them in the XML, and I'm now able to group them so that I now have a corpus which treats all the Sony documents as one document, all the Nintendo as one, all the Microsoft, and so on and so on and so on. And now I can begin to use various tools to study it. So I start with my favorite, the corpus terms. This is like the word cloud. It shows me a list of what the most high frequency words are. I can then, and you'll notice up here, I'm just calling my corpus a tool. I name the tool, and then I just give a parameter. In this case, I'm just setting the width of that I want the tool. Then I can begin to use the trend. So here I'm creating a query. I want to look at three words: entertainment, technology, and business. How do these companies present themselves? Do they present themselves as entertainment companies, or do they present themselves as technology companies, or do they emphasize business in their websites? And you can see that I've got some comments here because these are other searches that I can copy and paste into these quotation marks here. So here's one: smile, fun, dream, curiosity, and face. And then I've got positive and negative to do sort of sentiment analysis. And then I open up the trends tool and I give it the query. I set some other parameters, and this is what I get. I can see for the different companies, Bandai Namco. So Bandai talks about business and entertainment, but not about technology at all. Microsoft, not surprisingly, talks about business and talks a lot about technology, but not about entertainment, because Microsoft is more than just a video game company. Nintendo, on the other hand, talks a little bit about business, a little bit about technology, but talks a lot about entertainment. And Sega Sammy, strangely, is about business and entertainment. You would expect Sega Sammy to perhaps talk a bit about technology, but their public-facing websites and annual reports seem to talk a lot about business. And for those of you who know the Japanese environment, Sega Sammy also makes things like pachinko machines. And here we have Sony and Square Enix. And Square Enix, of course, is a mostly game company. So they're again talking about entertainment. So now I'm able to, by loading this document and grouping by these families, I'm able to now look at how these different companies are using the same words. Here is a slightly more complicated. So here's an example of a visualization that is not available in Voyant, which I can program, which I've programmed in JavaScript. And it basically takes each one of the different documents, Bandai Namco, Microsoft, Nintendo, and something like that, and gives me the top high frequency words in a table. So I can just sort of compare them moving my eye across here. So Nintendo, the word Nintendo is very high, but smiles. Those of you who know Nintendo know that they talk a lot about smiles and fun and children, faces, touches. That's sort of interesting. Whereas Microsoft is technology, organization, innovation. They have a different sort of rhetoric here. So I'm one of the things I'm doing with this notebook is I'm actually keeping track of the stuff that is interesting, the different displays that are interesting, which I then might use in writing a paper. And I can also, when I publish the paper or present it, I can share this notebook and people can come in and review my inferences and disagree with me if you want. And then down here, I do something which I think is really neat, but is very advanced. I now load the same the same text, the same XML text, but now I use a different I use a different tag to group. This time I use a region tag. So it allows me to compare the companies from Japan from the companies from US. So this includes, for example, Nintendo US would be in the US column, and Nintendo Japan, the document there would be in the Japanese column. And I can look at the same three words, but you can see that the word technology is much bigger in the websites that are from the US corporate headquarters or US websites, whereas words like business and entertainment seem to be bigger in the Japanese the Japanese based websites. And again, I do the same thing that I did above with a special chunk of code as I just look at, I want to actually double check and look at the language. So what you've seen here is a use of these notebooks in a research project where I can document what it is I'm doing. I can describe what we did. In this particular case, I can actually manage the text. If I came across a new website, I could sort of add it at the bottom and I could add the tags and stuff like that. I can edit this. I then create a corpus. I use the corpus, and I could, if I wanted to, include various notes describing what it is I'm thinking about. I could actually turn this into a full-blown sort of interactive paper. So I'm now going to go back to that simple notebook that I created. And one of the other uses of notebooks, so I use it to sort of document my research projects. But one of the other uses, which I also use, is I use it when I'm teaching Voyant. Now, this is only when I'm teaching text analysis in a full-blown course. I don't show them Spidal if it's a, one class. But if it's a course on text analysis, One of the things that I really want the students to do is not simply use Voyant, but begin to think through text analysis, to use these tools to make arguments about a text or a phenomena. And to that end, the notebook programming environment is what I assign them to do at the end. I ask them to write a paper, or sometimes it's a shorter than a full-blown paper, but I ask them to write an intervention in which they make an argument using the text analysis tools. And to do that, they can use the text editing. So they would go in here, they would start by giving it a new title. They're interested in monsters in, um, let's say, the monster in Frankenstein. So they can add a new title, they can specify who the author is, they can enter various keywords if they want, a description, so on and so on. Then they can, in this first text cell, they can delete the cell if they want, but they can also say, they can also just type what it is they're doing. And of course, they can continually edit this thing. So in this notebook, I want to show that text analysis is a Frankenstein monster of a method. So they've now sort of announced what it is they want to do. They then have some code cells, and they could take, for example, this code cell here, and they could duplicate it. So I'm going to add another code cell. So I add a new cell. I'm going to add a new code cell beneath. I can paste that code in, and now I could sort of go, well, what other words do I want to query? Or do I want to try a different tool? And so I can go into Voyant Tools and I can say, well, it'd be interesting to look at collocates. So what if I want the collocates to monster? So I've now set up this Voyant tool. I'm now going to export it. And here we have the line of code that we need. My corpus tool, corpus collocates, query monster. I've copied that. I'm gonna delete that, leave it. It's not gonna be saved anywhere. I go back here. I'm actually gonna replace this. So I'm just pasting in the code. I'm letting Voyant generate the code, and hopefully there it is. So now we have the words that co-locate. What are the words that show up close to the word monster? Created, wretch, shall, saw, form, depart, behold. I can now play with this tool. I could increase the context. So now I want, let's say, uh, 9 words on either side. I could change the word that I want to search for. And, now all of a sudden we see the word agony, struggled. We're beginning to see a number of sort of negative words that have a negative valence. And these are the ones that are sort of outlined in red here. Fiend, doubt. But we also have words like face and existence. So you could imagine how I might start making an argument about how Frankenstein's monster is represented by Mary Shelley. I could, if I go, I think I'm seeing something interesting here. I'm going to add a text cell. So I've just added a text cell here, and I go and I type some notes to myself. I think I'm seeing a trend here. Lots of negative words. Now, I'm gonna sort of wrap up here and just mention a few things at the top here, just to sort of give you a view of some of the other features. Of course, one of the things you want to do is save this. In order to save it, and this is one thing that is different from Voyant. When you upload a text to Voyant, we cache it. You don't have to identify yourself or anything. Here, I need to sign in with GitHub. So you have to get a GitHub account. GitHub accounts are free, but you have to do it, and then you have to sign in with GitHub, and only then can you save your notebook. I'm not going to actually save this since this isn't particularly interesting. You can create a new SpeedOwl notebook just by clicking on the plus sign. You can open an existing SpeedOwl notebook. You can upload a file because one of the things you can do over here is you can export your SpeedOwl notebook, this one right here. You can export it as an HTML download. And then what you get, you see right here, we have the Speed Out notebook, but this is not editable. It isn't edible either. It doesn't taste very good. But what we have here is an HTML page on my local hard drive, which shows all the text cells and the code cells, and this can be uploaded back to SpeedOwl, so you can save your notebooks locally and then upload them back to SpeedOwl, and they become interactive then. If I tried to run this code, you'll see that there's nothing over here. There's no run button. So it's not going to actually function. This is just a straight, if you will, documentation, a picture of what was happening. So that's the thing that I have. I'm back here. So I showed how you can export it to HTML, and this is the one you want to use if you want to save it locally. You can always, the same way in Voyant, you can get a bibliographic reference. You can get an HTML snippet, which doesn't make it quite as much sense in this case, but this is if you want to place it in a different web page. And then you've always got the question mark here where you can get documentation. In this case, we open up the documentation on the side so that you can actually look at the code and see examples of the code. One of the things we're looking at doing is if you have a ChatGPT account, is setting it up so you could actually use something like ChatGPT to help you write JavaScript. So that's the help, the export, logging into your account. We then have a catalog. This is where you can find public notebooks that different people have written. Um, you can view and edit the metadata, which we saw before. And this one right here runs all the code blocks. So if you're opening a notebook that you haven't looked at in a while, you can run all the code blocks and it sort of runs the whole program. So that's my quick little tour through SpeedOwl. This is still a work in progress. Your data is safe, so it's not the case that you're going to lose anything if you play with it. But you do have to acquire some level of comfort with JavaScript, or you have to be comfortable copying the JavaScript code from the Voyant export and building your notebooks that way. On this note, I'm going to stop.